So, with this 14-team playoff that appears to be very well on the way, are the Pac-12 and the Mountain West just destined to merge one day? Not exactly.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal. We've got you covered as always. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll check in Norman, Oklahoma. What a big spring football upcoming for the Sooners and head coach Brent Venables. And I think Penn State's Big Ten title odds, they're too low. They're just too low. They should be higher. We'll talk about that. But we're starting with the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, who you could realistically see merging one day. I mean a full-on, whether that's Oregon State and Washington State play under the Mountain West label, or the Mountain West dissolves and they play under the Pac-12 label, and they form a group of five conference that would be the best in all of college football. But Oregon State and Washington State can have the opportunity, because of the war chest they got as a settlement from the 10 departing schools, they can build a conference that would be even better. And I think that opportunity is there. Now, this came to the front of my mind when the news came down that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get a combined 58% of the college football playoff revenue. And then there will be about 14% each for the Big 12 and the ACC. And then the group of five schools, as a part of, the playoff distribution, will get 1.8 million each. And Oregon State and Washington State are getting 1/5 of that, in the $300,000 range. So, as I talked about in yesterday's show, for the next couple of years, that's sustainable for Oregon State and Washington State financially, because the NCAA tournament units they're going to get are $2 million per unit, paid out over several years. I think they'll be able to backfill that amount of money they would get. So they're not being forced to go and join the Mountain West. They don't need to make that move. But eventually, they will have to make some sort of move. And I think that move is to take the top teams from the Mountain West and the best teams that you can find from the American Conference and form the premier group of five league. Because while there can be a 2-year period, as I discussed, in which Oregon State and Washington State aren't at a huge deficit financially compared to what they would have been had they joined the Mountain West instead of sticking it out in the Pac-12 and waiting to see how they can rebuild the league, that's not a long-term plan. And by long-term plan, I'm talking 2026 to about the early 2030s. And so for the Beavs and the Cougs, and frankly, several teams in the Mountain West, what they are going to look at is the Mountain West media rights deal is up in 2 years. It's got this season, it's got next season, and then boom, the playoff structure is going to change, and everything's being discussed right now by, and close to being finalized by the Big Ten and the SEC and everybody else involved. But where the heads need to be for programs that want to get into the Power Four, even if that's the Big 12 or the ACC, which are behind certainly the Big Ten and the SEC, and you can't really close that gap, is still ahead of where the group of five teams are financially. And also just credibility-wise, in the broad picture of the sport, you got to be thinking about the early 2030s. That's where the mindset has to be. But that does not need to be a merger entirely. It doesn't have to be, because the money can be worked out to where I know there are penalties involved with Oregon State and Washington State doing anything that involves bringing over Mountain West teams that are making a move that's not all-inclusive of everybody. But if you're the Beavs and the Cougs and you want to build the best conference you can, and frankly, if you're a lot of the programs in the Mountain West, you want to form a league that is only the best of the best. It doesn't have to feel right in your heart, in your stomach. It might feel kind of icky or gross, but guess what? It's the only way to stay alive nowadays. That's the world that has been fostered by all of this realignment craziness. And so when you go up and down the Mountain West, just ask yourself, I'm going to list off every team that'll be in the Mountain West this year and next year. Tell me how many you think are capable of playing at a group of five college football playoff level. You ready? Boise State, San Jose State, UNLV, Air Force, Wyoming, Fresno State, Utah State, Hawaii, Colorado State, Nevada, New Mexico, San Diego State. I've got about 4 in there, maybe 5. Boise State that have proven that they can play at the highest group of 5 level of football possible over a consistent period of time. Boise State, Fresno State, and San Diego State are the easy ones. I think Air Force, Wyoming, maybe. Those are kind of the fringe teams in there. But everybody else, I know San Jose State and UNLV just had really good years in the Mountain West, but they haven't proven they can sustain it. San Jose State just underwent a coaching change. We'll see how that goes. Does Barry Odom feel like he's long for the road at UNLV? Not in my view. Eventually, I think he's going to garner a higher level job. So if you're looking to build the best conference you can and do it in the most affordable way possible, because the war chest is substantial, but it's not unlimited. It's not like it's an endless amount of money that couldn't possibly all be spent up. No, there are a lot of ways that money can and will get spent. You only want to go for the heavy hitters there. And if that's the approach that Oregon State and Washington State take, and I think it's the one they should take, you'd probably look at 4 from the American and 4 from the Mountain West. And your 4 from the American would be Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, and probably UTSA. That's where I would go. You'd go 4 and 4 with 2. Last time I checked, I might need to get a calculator. I think that's 10 teams. 8 is the requirement, and I think temporarily that's a spot where you'd want to be. That's where you'd want to go. So I don't think that a merger between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, whole scale, is inevitable, is what is ultimately going to happen here. I think that new look Pac-12 will come to fruition one day, or at least I think it should. What about Norman, Oklahoma? This is a change of subject, of course. In the industry, you call this a tease. It's a big spring football for the Oklahoma Sooners, perhaps as big for them as anybody in the SEC. First, though, let's talk about Nissan. Every week, we're bringing you a bracket highlight brought to you by our friends at Nissan. We're picking a team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Yukon Huskies are the Nissan Armada, the top-seeded team as hardcore as it gets. No wonder they're the top overall seed in the NCAA tournament and the number 1 seed in the East region. The Auburn Tigers are the Nissan Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC, winning the conference tournament. They're red hot, might even knock off the aforementioned Yukon Huskies. The Oregon Ducks are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in the final Pac-12 tournament, as we know it, punching their ticket to the big dance. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Ducks have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop them at nissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com. This episode also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV, your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the looming NCAA tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. They've got Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and all the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, and lots more. You get to dive into all the analysis, highlights, and more to stay up to date. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, and travel. So, check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. You can even find some cooking videos over there. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. It's a big spring football for the Oklahoma Sooners in Norman. Joining me to talk about it, Josh Helmer, co-host of the Locked On Sooners podcast with John Williams here at the Locked On Network. Josh, is it more important for Jackson Arnold or the new look offensive line he's going to play behind this spring?
Well, chicken and the egg, right? Obviously connected there. Probably offensive line, because I just don't know that Jackson Arnold can go be who Oklahoma fans want Jackson Arnold to be if Spencer Brown from Michigan State, if Fabechi Wiwu transfer in from North Texas, Oklahoma's brought in a number of transfer portal additions along the offensive line. If those guys don't hit, Garion Hatchett comes over to Oklahoma from Washington, Michael Tarkin from USC. It was a big-time transfer portal haul for Oklahoma up front because, well, they're replacing 5 starters along their offensive line. If those guys don't work out, or it takes, even in this 12-team playoff format, Spencer, if it takes until the back half of the year, that might be too late for Oklahoma. So out of the two, I would say offensive line. Obviously, Jackson Arnold needs to be as advertised and needs to be less mistake-prone than he was in the bowl game versus Arizona.
Yeah, a guy who has only really played one game in his career, showed glimpses of tremendous potential in that Alamo Bowl game. Also, as you mentioned, had some freshman mistakes, which is to be expected, but that, as they say, is what spring football is for. I want to go back to this offensive line, though, because some of you may be thinking that you misheard Josh, but you did not. This is 5 new starters along the offensive line. I can't remember any team having to do that, or at least the teams that I've followed in my lifetime. Josh, have you seen that with Oklahoma before? And they bring in all these new guys, and USC and Colorado are kind of the poster child for the crowd that say, well, if you just bring in transfers, they don't have the chemistry, it doesn't mesh, it can't work, and everything like that. How does Oklahoma handle this unique situation?
In the immortal words of the voice of the Sooners, Toby Rowland, we're about to find out. I don't know. Oklahoma has found some legitimate success with transfer portal guys. Tyler Guyton in this upcoming NFL draft is going to be a first-round draft pick. He was a transfer portal guy for Oklahoma. They've had other transfer portal additions in recent years that have become NFL players. But to not have really any sort of continuity from in-house names for the most part. Jacob Sexton started a couple of games for OU, and he's somebody that is not a transfer portal addition. He's somebody that has been with Oklahoma now for a couple of seasons. So you've got that. We'll see if maybe a couple of the names at center. Troy Everett is a transfer portal guy, but he's been at Oklahoma for a couple of years. Joshua Bates will have a chance to factor in at center for Oklahoma. So there are some in-house names that have been at Oklahoma, have developed at Oklahoma, but probably 3/5, maybe even 4 out of 5 slots on the offensive line could be transfer portal guys. And so the long answer, I guess, to a simple question is don't really know. Look, you think about Michigan, right? In the national championship game, had a number of guys. I want to say 4 out of 5, or the bulk of the starters, started their careers at other places, and that's the national champion, Michigan Wolverines. So it can be done, but I think probably most coaching staffs would tell you that's not the desired result, and yet, maybe that's just where we're headed for a lot of even big-name college football programs.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of coaches will say they want recruiting to be the foundation and the portal to be, kind of the icing on the cake, the cherry on top of the sundae, rather than being each of the individual scoops of ice cream. I think at some level they say that to placate their fans, so that fans don't think they're just bringing in guys from all over the place and everybody's a mercenary and such. Because you look at these transfer portal hauls and guys bring in, or coaches that is, they're bringing in 10, 12, 15, sometimes starters on both sides of the ball combined. It's like you got 22 starters on the field. You can certainly do a lot. I think the depth, guys that fill in when someone goes down or has to come out of the game because of an injury and equipment malfunction. That's where, your high school recruiting can really come into play and be important over the course of a season. But Oklahoma has certainly done a great job at that with regards to the quarterback position. So Jeff Lebby gone to be the head coach at Mississippi State in the SEC. In steps Jackson Arnold. It's a big spring football for the offensive line, as we've talked about, but it's a big spring football for him as well. This is the first time he's going through spring practice as the number 1 quarterback, as the starter. He watched Dylan Gabriel do it last year. What are the expectations? What does Oklahoma need from him to have a successful season?
Well, he's got to be that guy. He's got to be the number 1 quarterback. He's got to. You get the impression that he's going to be ready for that. And really, if you kind of follow the breadcrumbs or, pay attention to the tea leaves, tough to say if Oklahoma had told Dillon Gabriel definitively, right? Tough to say if OU had told Dillon Gabriel, hey, no, we want you back as a starting quarterback next season, if he would still be here or if it, plays out the same way where he goes to Oregon. Don't know about the NIL ramifications. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you've got a chance to earn and there's a name, image, likeness attached to it for Dillon Gabriel, that, look, it's good business for somebody that may or may not have gotten drafted or been a 6th or 7th round guy, maybe an undrafted free agent quarterback, to go earn while I can earn. But that's a long way to say that Jackson Arnold has the confidence as, hey, here's a guy that was the Elite 11 winning quarterback out of high school. He was a 5-star quarterback. And really, it was sort of Oklahoma's plan, we think, to tell Dillon Gabriel, hey, find another situation at Oregon, which is a great situation for Dillon Gabriel, but Oklahoma's ready to turn the page, head into the SEC, and have Jackson Arnold as its starting quarterback. Now, was that the right decision immediately for 2024? That is going to be, if things don't go according to plan, that'll be an interesting debate, I think, that gets waged among Sooner fans. So for Jackson Arnold, it's a big spring for him. I think he's incredibly confident in his own abilities. And clearly the coaching staff, to that point, Spencer, is confident in who Jackson Arnold is or what he is about to become. But look, he's got a number of talented weapons back, and yet it's time for him to grow up and go earn those next couple of starts and be that 5-star superstar, Heisman Trophy, number 1 overall draft pick type of quarterback that Oklahoma, in the recent memory with Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and even Jalen Hurts, they've had those guys, right? That's the expectation of the program. And now Jackson Arnold is supposed to be Caleb Williams. If you say half a season, he's supposed to be that next guy of that type of ilk.
Oklahoma year 1 in the SEC. Win total is 7.5. Compare that to their arch rival counterpart at Texas, whose win total at FanDuel is 10.5. What is a good season for Oklahoma, and what's the biggest key to accomplishing that?
I think, for us, probably at a place like Oklahoma, the bare minimum is going to be college football playoff. If you don't get into the college football playoff under this 12-team format, and oh, by the way, there's a good chance in 2 years it's a 14-team format. We'll see, what the automatics wind up being in the SEC and the Big Ten.
For those listening on podcast, by the way, at the words 14-team playoff, my eyes rolled up into my skull. But continue, Josh.
I know, and a lot of college football fans are that way. But bottom line is, to me, I think you start there at a place like Oklahoma. If you can't be one of the nation's top 12 teams, then, first-year starting quarterback or not, that's a problem. And for somebody like Brent Venables that is looking to be the long-term answer as the head coach, he's beloved by Oklahoma fans, right? This is the guy that OU fans wanted. They wanted Brent Venables. When he stepped off that plane at Max Westheimer Airport, it was a party, and for good reason in Norman, Oklahoma. They got their guy. He came back. But you all of a sudden don't make the college football playoff again. And, oh, by the way, it's a 12-team format. That would be a disappointment for OU. So I would start there. Whatever that looks like in the win-loss column, I think probably 9-3 worst case would be the type of record you're talking about. And against the schedule that Oklahoma is going to be facing, if you don't get blown out, if Alabama doesn't embarrass you and you don't go to LSU to end the season and get embarrassed, or Missouri or Ole Miss is a challenging schedule, Tennessee at home, if you play competitively and only lose twice or 3 times and look good in the other games, then I think you're probably looking at a college football playoff for Oklahoma. So that's my expectation for OU, and I think probably most OU fans would match that.
I think 9-3 is the bare minimum in the SEC and Big Ten to be in the 12-team hunt, to get one of those 7 at-large spots for the next 2 seasons before they expand it to 14. And we'll be at 24 teams in the playoff before you know it, folks. Don't you worry. The fine folks running college football have got us covered. And Josh Helmer's got us covered for everything Oklahoma, coming by for his inaugural appearance here on Locked On College Football. Josh, thank you so much.
Spencer, hey, man, great to be with you anytime.
Penn State, I have a question about Penn State. Are their Big Ten title odds too low? We'll talk about that next. Well, the championship odds in the Big Ten and every conference in college football are provided by our friends at FanDuel. You can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, avoiding that big upset, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. I am leaning towards either Houston or North Carolina. That's where I'm at right now. But guess what? I'm recording this show on Monday. By Tuesday, I could feel very differently because March Madness rocks. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to pick whoever you want and bet on every single game. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner here at the Locked On Network. What are Penn State's Big Ten title odds? Okay, fine. I'll tell you. I won't make you look it up yourself. It's plus 600. Plus 600. That's not the longest set of odds that I have seen for a team that could reasonably win their conference championship. You got Texas Tech, for instance, over in the Big 12. Their conference championship odds plus 850. Rather steep. For Penn State, though, they have the fourth best odds, and then the drop-off between them and team number 5, who I have as the #1 dark horse to win the Big Ten, that's USC, is rather substantial. It goes from plus 600 to plus 2,300. So Vegas doesn't think USC has that great of a shot. I think it's better than plus 2,300, but I think Penn State's odds should be higher than plus 600. They are being undervalued in that spot. Why? Well, they're currently behind the Michigan Wolverines at plus 260, the Oregon Ducks at plus 250, and the Big Ten favorites, of course, Ohio State, at plus 155, which, as far as conference title favorites go, those are pretty short odds, meaning Vegas really, really likes Ohio State. But I don't think Penn State can be overlooked in this discussion. They do not have a head-to-head with Oregon, by the way. We don't know what the tiebreakers are going to be now that the Big Ten has done away with divisions, which is what everyone should, of course, be doing in college football, because divisions like auto bids for the playoff are ridiculous in many ways, but it's what happens in a sport that doesn't have great governance structure, so we just kind of have to live with it as college football fans. But for Penn State's odds to be the fourth best in the Big Ten, I think is undervaluing the Nittany Lions. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, Penn State is returning 70% of their production according to ESPN's Bill Connelly. Well, that metric has historically been indicative of success. For example, last year, 3 of the top 25 teams in returning production were, wait for it, Michigan. Michigan was up there. Washington was up there. Oh, and Texas was up there. Penn State returned 70% of production from a team that did what last year? Oh, yeah. They had a 10-2 regular season with their only losses coming to Ohio State and Michigan, per our usual arrangement for the team up in College Station, or in State College, Pennsylvania, rather. Whew, boy, can't get that one wrong. Now, can I? Right? I mean, that would just be absolutely blasphemous. But anyway, so for the Nittany Lions here, I just think there's some real value at plus 600 because you've got the returning production factor. And when you think about the Nittany Lions last year, what did you think about? Well, how great their defense was and how their offense was, it was okay. They were just all right. I have a couple principles when talking about college football teams that I regularly apply. One of those is going to come into play here with Penn State momentarily. But Penn State, they lose Manny Diaz as their defensive coordinator. All right, not great. I think Manny Diaz is pretty sharp. He goes to Duke. He's got Malik Murphy coming over from Texas. The Blue Devils could be a solid team in the ACC. But we're talking about the Big Ten here because Penn State returned 70% of their overall production from a year ago. They've got their quarterback returning, and they've got him a new offensive coordinator. Do you know the name Andy Kotelnicki? Probably not. You probably haven't heard it before listening to or watching the show, unless you're, of course, a fan of the Nittany Lions. That is the new offensive coordinator for James Franklin. This is a really good hire and an under-the-radar hire for Penn State in the large context of college football. Because when you think about big coordinator hires, it's hard to make a big splash. Garrett Riley getting hired to Clemson last year was a big splash. Why? He was the OC on a TCU team that overachieved, went to the national championship game, and of course got blown out by Georgia. But a lot of teams have been blown out by Georgia. Not a whole heck of a lot of shame in that. But This is a move that I really like for Penn State. Where has Kotelnicki been the last 3 years? Oh, with Lance Leipold at Kansas. See how I paused there for dramatic effect to just let that kind of marinate and sit with you for a moment? Because Kansas has been one of the most remarkable coaching jobs in all of college football. Their offense has been exceptional. And with Jalen Daniels at quarterback, when he's been healthy, Kansas has been a top 25 football team. Remember, Kansas beat Oklahoma last year. Do you know how crazy of a sentence fundamentally that is to say in college football? Lance Leipold's a great coach, but a great coach can only be as good as the staff he is able to put together. And he had put together a really good staff. And Andy Kotelnicki was one of the guys who headlined that staff. And over the last few years, Kansas has had a premier offense in college football. On that side of the ball, specifically what I like about this marriage between Kotelnicki, who's got a good background with a really good college quarterback in Jalen Daniels, and Drew Allar, the returning quarterback at Penn State. And remember my rule. Remember one of my many rules. I am going to lean in favor of teams that return both their head coach and quarterback from the previous season. Not exclusively, but that's a good foundation to have because it's not a common one in college football. So Drew Allar comes back to start for another year. James Franklin is there, new offensive coordinator. By the way, did you know that last year Kansas was 12th in the country in creating 20-plus yard plays on offense? What was the biggest critique of Drew Allar and the Penn State offense last year? Too much dink and dunk. You had a reporter, he got clowned by James Franklin, and understandably so. He just didn't ask the question in the best possible way. But what he was getting at was, why is there not a greater vertical presence to this offense? Why is everything dink and dunk, no explosive, nothing of the sorts? So they bring in a new offensive coordinator. And this is another rule I have. When you've got a weakness on the field, whether you're a good team or a bad team, and you aggressively attack it with good moves, either in the coaching carousel or transfer portal in the offseason, I'm going to feel good about you. And so for Penn State to have more returning production than a Michigan team that they almost beat last year, to upgrade their offensive coordinator, to keep their head coach and quarterback in place for another year of development of your young and very talented signal caller, that's a series of moves that compared to Michigan, who's got a new-ish head coach, a new quarterback, and is not returning 70% of their production from the previous year, I think Penn State should have higher Big Ten championship odds than the Michigan Wolverines. I don't know that it should be a gap of plus 460 to plus 600, but I don't think that gap should exist between those teams whatsoever. I think that Penn State and Michigan are closer than the sports books think. That's my take, and that's why. I think the Nittany Lions in the Big Ten, yeah, they could win it. I've seen it happen before. It's not impossible. It's just that Ohio State and Oregon are very good. They're absolutely good. But guess what? These games are played, I believe the old saying is, on the field, not on paper. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what they say, because that's exactly what it is. Offensive coordinator. You bring in a guy like Julian Fleming from Ohio State to boost the receiving core. Drew Allar is back. 70% returning production. I think Penn State's Big Ten championship odds are just a little bit low. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.